Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are opening up the files on a group of bacteria that, well, it truly defines that whole Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing.
It really does. I mean,
Yeah.
you have organisms here that can live quietly in your throat 1 minute,
Right. Completely harmless.
and the next they're causing, systemic shock, meningitis, or literally dissolving tissue.
It's a massive and really volatile spectrum. So today we're tackling the Streptococci, working our way through Chapter 9 of Lippincott Illustrated Reviews, Microbiology.
Right. And our mission is pretty clear: to build a mental map. We need to know how to classify them, how they dodge our immune system, which is frankly brilliant, and how to kill them.
Before they kill the patient.
Exactly. And it all starts with the family profile. I'm talking about gram-positive cocci.
Tears?
Sears, yeah. But they're not like Staphylococci, which clump up like grapes. Streptococci, they form pairs or long chains, like a string of beads.
Okay, but before we even get to that, there's that first big hurdle, right? The catalase test.
The first fork in the road. You have a gram-positive sphere. Is it staph or is it strep?
How do you tell?
You drop hydrogen peroxide on them. Staph makes catalase, so it bubbles. A lot. Streptococci are catalase-negative.
So no bubbles.
No bubbles. If you see nothing, you're in strep territory.
Okay, so we're in strep territory, but this is a huge family. How do we start sorting through them?
We need a roadmap. And the best one really is to see what they do to blood. We grow them on blood agar and just watch. We're looking at their hemolytic patterns.
The alpha, beta, gamma system.
Correct. Think of it like a scale of destruction. First up is alpha hemolysis. This is only partial. The bacteria make hydrogen peroxide, and it turns the hemoglobin green. So you get this greenish, kind of bruised-looking ring.
And that's what, pneumococcus in the viridans group?
Exactly. Then you have beta hemolysis. This is the aggressive one.
Total destruction.
Total destruction.
Yeah.
The bacteria release enzymes that they completely rupture the red blood cells. You get perfectly clear halo around the colony.
And that's where the big dogs are, Group A and Group B.
That's your S. pyogenes and S. agalactiae. And finally, there's gamma hemolysis, which is nothing. No change, no lysis at all. That's your Enterococcus.
So green, clear, and nothing. What about the Lancefield grouping? Is that a different thing?
It just adds another layer. It's based on a carbohydrate in the cell wall, the C substance. That's where Group A and Group B come from. It's a serological backup.
Got it. Okay, let's start with the heavy hitters then. The clear zones. Group A, beta hemolytic Streptococcus. Streptococcus pyogenes.
This is the one you'll see the most. It's the classic and arguably the most aggressive of the bunch.
Most people hear strep and just think sore throat. But looking at its arsenal, this thing is built like an armored tank.
It is an armored tank with an invisibility cloak. The outermost layer is a capsule made of hyaluronic acid.
And that's the camouflage, right? Because hyaluronic acid is in our own connective tissue.
Precisely. It's wearing a suit made of human materials, so our immune system just patrols right past it. It doesn't register as foreign.
So it hides in plain sight. But it also has weapons.
Oh, yes. The M protein is the main one. It sticks out from the cell, and its job is to be antiphagocytic.
So it just physically stops our immune cells from eating it?
It blocks them. And it messes with the complement system, which is our body's alarm.
The book says there are over 80 types of M protein, so that's why you can get strep throat over and over again.
That's exactly why. You build immunity to one type, but then you get hit with another. Your old antibodies don't work.
Okay, so it has camouflage and a shield. But how does it cause so much damage, from a sore throat to toxic shock?
That's the chemical warfare. The exotoxins. First you have streptolysins, which cause that beta hemolysis we see in the plate. But the real danger is the paragenic exotoxins.
The superantigens. What does that actually mean for the patient?
Well, a normal antigen activates a tiny, tiny fraction of your T cells. It's targeted. A superantigen. It's a blunt instrument. It bypasses the safe. It's a biological explosion. You get a cytokine storm, just a flood of inflammatory chemicals. That's what causes the rash and scarlet fever and the total systemic collapse in toxic shock syndrome.
The bacteria is basically tricking the body into attacking itself.
Exactly.
Okay, let's walk through the diseases from mild to wild. First, pharyngitis.
Strep throat. You get that purulent inflammation on the tonsils. It's miserable, but treatable.
Then skin infections, impetigo.
Impetigo, with those honey-crusted lesions on kids. And erysipelas, which is a bit deeper. You see this fiery red raised rash with really sharp borders.
And then we get to the nightmare scenario. Necrotizing fasciitis, The flesh-eating bacteria.
It's an accurate description of the effect.
Yeah.
The bacteria invade the deep tissue, the muscle planes, and they release toxins that just kill everything. Shut down blood supply.
And it spreads so fast.
Incredibly fast. Centimeters per hour, sometimes. A patient can go from having a sore leg to needing an amputation in less than a day. The only treatment is to surgically cut away all the dead tissue.
That's terrifying. But then there's this other layer of danger, right? The stuff that happens after the infection is gone.
The post-streptococcal sequelae. Yes,
Yeah.
this is a very high-yield topic. These aren't active infections, they're autoimmune reactions.
Like rheumatic fever.
Right. It happens a few weeks after an untreated sore throat. It's molecular mimicry. The antibodies your body made against the M protein get confused.
And they start attacking the heart.
And the joints, yes. This is why we treat strep throat with antibiotics. It's not about the sore throat. It's about preventing permanent heart damage.
Okay, but then there's the other one. Acute glomerulonephritis. Kidney inflammation.
That's different. It's caused by antigen-antibody complexes that clog up the filters in the kidney.
And here's the classic exam question. Does treating the infection with penicillin prevent the kidney disease?
No, absolutely not. That is the key distinction. Penicillin prevents rheumatic fever, but it does not prevent post-strep glomerulonephritis. You have to remember that.
So how do we kill group A strep? You mentioned penicillin.
Penicillin G. And here's the good news. For whatever reason, pyogenes is still universally sensitive to it. It hasn't really developed resistance.
But for necrotizing fasciitis, you add clindamycin. Why both?
Penicillin only works on growing bacteria. In a really dense infection, some bacteria go dormant. Clindamycin works differently. It shuts down the protein factory inside the cell.
So it stops the toxin production cold.
Immediately, it turns off the tap for those superantigens.
All right, let's move on. The other beta hemolytic. Group B strep. Streptococcus agalactiae. I always just remember B for baby.
That is the perfect mnemonic. Group A is for throat and skin. Group B is for baby.
And this one lives where?
It colonizes the vagina and GI tract in about a quarter of healthy women. It's totally asymptomatic for the mother. But for a newborn passing through the birth canal, it can be deadly.
Because the baby's immune system is so new.
Exactly. It's the #1 cause of neonatal meningitis and sepsis.
So, how do we prevent that?
We screen. Every pregnant woman gets a swab around 35 to 37 weeks. If she's positive, we don't treat her then. We wait until she's in labor.
And give her antibiotics during labor.
Right. Intrapartum prophylaxis.
Oh.
IV, penicillin G or ampicillin. That simple step has reduced neonatal group B disease by over 90%. It's a huge public health victory.
Okay, let's shift gears. We're leaving the clear zones and heading for the green zones, the alpha hemolytics. And the big one here is Streptococcus pneumonia, the pneumococcus.
A major pathogen. It looks different under the microscope. It's a diplococcus, so it's in pairs, and they're described as lancet-shaped, like little spear tips.
And its main defense is also a capsule.
The capsule is everything for this bug. It's a thick polysaccharide coat that prevents phagocytosis. Without it, the bacteria is harmless.
Yeah.
With it, it's a killer.
And the diseases it causes. I've heard the acronym MOPS.
MOPS is a great way to remember it. M for meningitis. It's the most common cause in adults. O for otitis media, the #1 cause of ear infections in kids. P for pneumonia, and S for sinusitis.
For pneumonia, the book mentions rusty sputum. What's that about?
It's a sign of serious lung damage. The inflammation is so intense that blood is leaking into the alveoli. That blood gets old, it oxidizes, and when the patient coughs it up, it literally looks like rust.
And why is the spleen so critical for fighting this one off?
The spleen's job is to filter the blood of encapsulated bacteria. So if you don't have a spleen, or if it doesn't work well, like in sickle cell disease, you are at extreme risk for overwhelming pneumococcal sepsis.
How do you identify it in the lab? We have a green colony. How do we know it's pneumococcus?
3 classic tests.
Wow.
First, it's optogen sensitive. A little disc of optogen will kill it. Second, it's bile soluble. Add bile salts and the bacteria just dissolve. And third, the quelling reaction.
Quelling means swelling, right?
It does. You add antiserum. And if the antibodies match the capsule visibly swells up under the microscope.
With diseases like meningitis and pneumonia, vaccines must be a huge deal. The text mentions 2, PPSV23 and PCV13. Why 2 different ones?
It's all about how our immune system develops. PPSV23 is a polysaccharide vaccine, just the pure sugar from the capsule. That works for adults. But a baby's immune system, it can't see pure sugar. It doesn't respond.
So how do you make it visible to a baby's immune system?
You cheat. Use a conjugate vaccine, the PCV13. You take the sugar and you chemically link it to a protein. The baby's immune system recognizes the protein, attacks it, and learns to recognize the sugar that's attached to it.
You're basically tricking it.
You're tricking it, and it works beautifully. Invasive pneumococcal disease in kids has just plummeted since we introduced it.
That's amazing. Okay, so we've covered the big three. Who's left?
The survivors and the opportunists. The Enterococci and the viridans group.
Enterococci. I think of these as the cockroaches of the bacterial world.
That's surprisingly accurate. They live in the gut. They are incredibly tough. They can grow in high salt and in 40% bile, conditions that would kill almost anything else.
And they cause hospital-acquired infections.
Yes. Nosocomial infections, UTIs from catheters, bloodstream infections. And the big problem is resistance.
VRE, vancomycin-resistant Enterococci.
Exactly. They're already naturally resistant to some antibiotics, but when they pick up resistance to vancomycin, our last resort drug, we're in big trouble.
Okay, so they're the tough guys. What about the viridans group?
Viridans is Latin for green. These are the normal alpha hemolytic bugs in your mouth. Streptococcus mutans, for example.
The one that causes cavities?
Right. But the real danger is if they get into the bloodstream during, say, a dental procedure. If you have a damaged heart valve, they can stick to it.
And that leads to subacute bacterial endocarditis.
A slow, smoldering infection on the heart valve. That's why people with known heart defects get antibiotics before they go to the dentist.
Okay, one last bug. Streptococcus bovis. The text has this really specific warning about it.
Ah, yes. The rule is simple, and you should never forget it. If you find S. bovis in a patient's blood, you have to look for colon cancer.
Why that specific link?
It lives in the gut. It shouldn't get into the blood unless there's a break in the wall of the colon. And very often, that break is a cancerous or precancerous lesion. It's a huge red flag.
Wow. So a blood culture can actually lead to an early cancer diagnosis.
It saves lives. It really does.
Okay, we've covered a lot. Let's try to recap the patterns here.
All right. Gram-positive coccus in chains. See beta hemolysis, that clear zone. Think, is it bacitracin sensitive? Yes. It's group A, throat and skin. Is it affecting a newborn? Think group B.
And if it's alpha hemolytic, the green zone.
Is it optogen sensitive? Then it's pneumococcus. Lungs, meningitis. If it's resistant to optogen, it's likely viridans, mouth, heart valves.
And if there's no hemolysis or it's growing in salt.
That's your Enterococcus, the tough hospital bug.
Yeah.
And always, always remember the S. bovis connection to colon cancer.
It all comes down to those patterns.
It really does. My advice is to look at figure 9.15 in the textbook. Seeing those plates, the green versus the clear, it makes it stick.
What's really striking is how specific the treatments have to be. It's not just give antibiotics. It's like we're dismantling a series of very specific machines.
That's the art of it. Understanding the mechanism is everything. Knowing why a sugar capsule is different from a hyaluronic acid capsule changes your entire approach.
A truly fascinating and terrifying family of bacteria. A huge thank you to the Last Minute Lecture team for helping us break this down today.
Good luck with your studies.
And we'll catch you on the next deep dive.